So going now over to the Edit tab, we're working more in a full-featured interface that has more stuff going on, and maybe a bit more ideal if you could pick up a second monitor so that you can spread some of these windows out. But in any case, you can see that you have the media pool over here on the top left. That's where all of your clips are going to be. The edit index in the bottom left. In most cases, I find you can just kind of churn that off, but what this will show is all of your most recent edits that you've made to your video, referring to the type of edit, in this case adding cross dissolves or adding clips onto the timeline, and you can see all of those listed chronologically. I don't need that, so I'm going to actually turn off the edit index. You also have the effects library. As I was just talking about with the cut tab, you have transitions, titles, and effects. Now those are listed as separate windows on the cut tab, but on the edit tab, they're all in this effects library toolbox. So if you want video transitions, you click on the video transitions menu. There's also audio transitions, which refers to crossfade, so that will have audio from one clip fade out as another clip fades in, or if you put it at the start of your video, as in the first video clip or the last video clip, then you can just have it fade from nothing or fade out to nothing in kind of the same way as a video dissolve, just with the audio levels instead. And then in the titles menu, you have many preset titles. So you might notice that these are called Fusion titles. So Fusion titles are 3D compositions that are set up in the Fusion tab. We won't really get into that too much in this video, but you can create 3D compositions inside of DaVinci Resolve, which can be things like particle effects, titles, creating 3D shapes, or putting an image on a plane. But that's a bit complicated for right now, so if you're interested in that, check out some of my other videos specifically on Fusion nodes. You can also go to the effects menu here for adding in an adjustment clip or a Fusion composition. So a Fusion composition would be where you want to create a completely new Fusion 3D composition from scratch. That would be the starting block for that. And there's also adjustment clips. So if you have multiple clips and you want to change all of them at the same time for a period of time, then you can put an adjustment clip on top of that and do something like zoom times 2. And as long as the clips are underneath that for that period of time, all of those clips will receive the zoom times 2. In addition to transitions and titles, you also have some other options you can create, such as blank Fusion compositions when you want to create like a 3D title but completely from scratch. You have open effects filters, which will change your video, but aren't meant to actually transition from one video scene into another one. So for instance, Resolve Effects blurs. If you want to blur out a video clip for the entire duration, then you can simply drag something like a Gaussian blur onto your video clip. And you'll see that that immediately changes how that video clip looks. Without going into too much detail, once you've added an open effects to a video clip, you can open up the inspector in the top right, and that will show up under the open effects category, and there'll be settings you can change about that. But for right now, I'll just go ahead and delete that. There's also audio effects here, some of which are built in, which you can drag onto a audio track in order to modify things about that track, such as having noise reduction to remove some of the background noise. If I scroll down here, you probably won't see VST effects, but you can note that you can add external plugins in the form of VST plugins to your computer, which DaVinci Resolve can use, such as Reaper plugins, which can add some extra filters, equalizers, compression tools, things like that, that you can, for the most part, get from the default Fairlight effects, but the external plugins usually work a little bit differently, and you may find you get better results there. Okay, so enough about all of that. When you're working in your timeline and you start adding a bunch of clips, you probably find that you want to increase or decrease the zoom for your timeline. So there is an option here right above the timeline where you can control the zoom, and you can see your video clips in a bunch more detail. So anywhere there is a little white box over the edges of one of our video or audio tracks, that is actually a video or audio transition. So we added these over in the Cut tab, but if you click on them, you can actually see that you can modify some of the settings about them over in the inspector. Just like you can click on a clip in order to modify settings in more detail, just like you can left click on a video clip in order to modify more settings than you would have been able to do otherwise on the Cut tab. So for instance, if we zoom in here and we left click on the cross dissolve, we can add an ease curve with the ease drop down menu and change that to in and out. And what that will make happen is that the transition starts slow and ends slow, but goes fastest in the middle, which will make it look like this. rather than no easing, which will have a consistent speed animation. So that would probably be easier to tell if we actually increase the duration of this effect. So you can left click on the border of a transition and drag it to increase the duration. So I'll drag it over here where it adds 1 second to it. You can also, in the inspector, change that manually by typing in a duration up here. So let's play that back one more time. And you may be able to tell there that the fastest point is in the center. So now I'll set it to ease curve none. And you'll see that it's a consistent speed effect. Using the inspector, you can make all kinds of changes over time like that. So let's go ahead and show some new stuff. I'm going to add in a third clip by dragging from my media pool onto the video timeline here and have it snap into place right next to that other clip. If you don't see it snap, then you may not have snapping enabled. So snapping is an option you can click on right here. You'll know it's enabled when it is white instead of grayed out. So on the Edit tab, there's different modes for editing video clips in the timeline. So by default, you have the selection mode, which will give you the basic operating system cursor, and that'll let you drag around clips to whatever timelines you need them on. Note that if you need a third timeline, you can just keep dragging up and the third timeline will be automatically created, as well as fourth and so on. There's also trim mode. So trim edit mode works most similar to how things do on the cut tab, where if you go over to the edge of a video clip, you can see that you can trim the start and end of your clip by left clicking and dragging on the side of the start or end of the clip. You can also adjust which part of the source material is going to be contained in this video clip without changing the duration in the timeline by left clicking in the thumbnail area and dragging to the left and right. You'll notice that as long as there's extra source material, it'll kind of give you this ghost white outline, showing how much data there is to keep dragging to pull from the source material. When you get to the edge of the source material, it'll give you that red line on the edge showing that there's nothing left to pull from. So you can make adjustments as long as there is source material. Now, if you want to make cuts without hitting Control-B every time, although Control-B works pretty nicely as a hotkey, as you can see there, you can also do it with the mouse if you click on Blade Edit Mode or you hit B on your keyboard. So this will change your cursor into a razor blade. You can left click anywhere you want in order to cut one clip into two clips. So by doing that, you can now manipulate these clips as their own individual pieces. So if I just want to take this part of the source material that I've cut into its own separate clips, and I want to zoom in on it, I can just go over to the inspector with that new clip selected, zoom, and set it to ×2. And you'll notice that that has no effect on any of the other clips, even if they were pulled from the same source material.